today we're going to run through the problem of, let's say, the breakdown of the science communication mechanism. Yeah, the breakdown of it. So why is this a problem? So we can say fairly confidently about the way ecological information is distributed to people, that it's a mode of information distribution that doesn't inspire action that will actually address the problems spoken to when that information is being distributed. So I've called this ecological information dump mode elsewhere. Maybe right there, or there, dunno, or here, pop. But the problem is it doesn't inspire the type of action that will actually solve the problems that it speaks to. Okay, so then we can think of the likes of the individuals who make up Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and whatever other, what we might call radical ecological movements. We can think of those individuals as being particularly sensitive to the information distributed via ecological information dump mode. What does that mean? They're like canaries in the coal mine. When information is disseminated about the doom and gloom that our world is currently going through because of human action and human activity, these individuals who make up these radical ecological movements are the most sensitive to that information, and so they take the action that it inspires to its logical extreme. And you can see in their actions that their actions are quite ineffective in terms of solving the problems that inspired said action. So instead of actually solving the ecological situation we find ourselves in, they're busy like disrupting and disturbing normal people going about their normal lives on this earth. And that's so ineffective because it's not normal people going about their normal lives that cause this problem. Caveat, point of order. It's the collective action of everybody, no single individual, that contributes to our ecological situation. So if we look at the way we live is fueled by fossil fuels. We are reliant upon them. We completely depend on them. Without them, we can't live the lives that we do live. And so if we seek to address this at the individual level, it looks like hobbling ourselves and not using said fossil fuels. And that's what the ecological movements, the radical ecological movements, when they take the information that they receive and they take the action inspired by said information to its logical extreme, they go for the individuals. But this won't address the problem. Okay, so we can say, based on this evidence, that we can see that the action that these radical movements take is not effective. We can then use that evidence to diagnose the upstream problem, further upstream problem, which here we can refer to as the broken science communication mechanism in our society. To really demonstrate just how problematic this problem of the broken science communication mechanism is, we're going to have to get into the weeds a bit, but stick with me because it's worth it. Let's just jump to the conclusion. This broken science communication mechanism results in two main problems. One is the likes of the individuals who are highly sensitive to the information distributed by it, which causes them to take action, which is ultimately ineffective, but it is the action that it inspires when you take the action it inspires to its logical extreme. And the second pernicious, insidious negative effect of the broken science communication mechanism is the undermining of people's trust in the likes of academic institutions and scientific analyses, which is terrible for us because science, the scientific method, is the best method we humans have discovered, invented for understanding the reality within which we inhabit. So they're the two negative effects of this broken science communication mechanism. But let's get into the weeds a bit right now for understanding this problem a bit better. So on Nate Higgins' podcast, I think it's episode 81, with Roger Pielke. Roger Pielke is a climate model expert, for want of a better word. He has been studying climate models and what the assumptions built into them are. And okay, so we get to a point for the IPCC. They present 4 what are called representative concentration pathways. These are 4 scenarios that project into the future what might happen if we humans continue on the trajectories that we are on. Okay, after 2005, the climate models changed. The quality about them changed. So before 2005, what people were doing to model the climate were taking socioeconomic factors and taking real world data, present day data, and then projecting into the future. Okay, what would the world look like if we continued these socioeconomic trends that we are currently engaged in or doing? After 2005, what happened was climate modelers would create a scenario independent of present day real world data, create that scenario, project it into the future, what it might look like, and then give that model or scenario over to the socioeconomic factor people and the integrative assessment people, and ask them to almost shoehorn what would have to be true about reality should these scenarios reflect underlying reality. So there was a disconnect between what was actually happening in the world and the models themselves. The models didn't necessarily model what was actually happening in the world, but instead were sort of hypothetical models independent of that reality, and then were backfilled with the data that would have to be true should these scenarios come true in the future. So there's that change, let's say qualitative change, after 2005. So then these 4 representative concentration pathways or scenarios arise, and for which the worst one is RCP 8.5. What happens then is that climate scientists who investigate reality and produce statistics and numbers and data that coincide with or somehow confirm this RCP 8.5 being the truest of all scenarios. The climate scientists who produce such data and papers that speak to that information are scientists who happen to get their papers published more often than not by the scientific journals like Science and Nature. And why is that? That's because Science and Nature know that the media outlets will then pick up on said information because it's speaking to this worst case scenario. And this is what gets viewers, is this attention grabbing worst case scenario, the world is ending sort of information. And so there's a pernicious positive feedback loop that has sort of organically emerged from the bottom up. It's not like a top down, you must spread bad information about the climate sort of a thing. It's an organic emergent property of this, of climate modelers disconnecting from reality, creating models that are independent of reality, and asking the socio-economic factor folks to backfill it or shoehorn data into that scenario, the data that would have to be true should that scenario come true in the future. It's an emergent property, and it's a pernicious positive feedback.
There's a whole set of reinforcing incentives. So if I'm publishing a study, if I use RCP 8.5, I'm going to get big climate change effect. It's more likely I'm going to get that study into Science or Nature. If Science or Nature decides to publish that study, it's more likely that the press release they put out is going to get picked up by the Washington Post or the New York Times. If I'm a reporter for the New York Times, I'm more likely to get a byline on the front page if I say climate change is going to be apocalyptic rather than not. Then you get to
it's not only social media that's forcing extreme views on things. It's the scientific and PR process itself that is advocating for more extreme views because they get more views and clicks and PR, etc.
That's where we're at. That is where we're at.